Chapter 3 The Audience. Monsieur de Treville was at the moment in rather ill humor. Nevertheless, he saluted the young man politely, who bowed to the very ground, and he smiled on receiving D'Artagnan's response, the Béarnese accent of which recalled him to him at the same time his youth and his country, a double remembrance which makes a man smile at all ages. But stepping toward the antechamber, and making a sign to D'Artagnan with his hand, as if to ask his permission to finish with orders before he began with him, he called 3 times with a louder voice at each time, so that he ran through the intervening tones between the imperative accent and the angry accent. Athos! Porthos! Aramis! The two musketeers with whom we have already made acquaintance, and who answered to the last of these 3 names, immediately quitted the group of which they had formed a part, and advanced toward the cabinet, the door of which closed after them as soon as they had entered. Their appearance, although it was not quite at ease, excited by its carelessness, at once full of dignity and submission. The admiration of D'Artagnan, who beheld in these 2 men demigods, and in their leader an Olympian Jupiter, armed with all his thunders, when the 2 musketeers had entered, when the door was closed behind them, when the buzzing murmur of the antechamber to which the summons which had been made had doubtless furnished fresh food, had recommended, when Monsieur de Treville had 3 or 4 times paced in silence, and with a frowning brow, the whole length of his cabinet, passing each time before Porthos and Aramis, who were as upright and silent as if on parade, he stopped all at once, full in front of them, and covering them from head to foot with an angry look. "Do you know what the king said to me?" cried he, "and that no longer ago than yesterday evening? Do you know, gentlemen?" "No," replied the 2 musketeers after a moment's silence. "No, sir, we do not." "But I hope that you will do us the honor to tell us," added Aramis in his politest tone and with his most graceful bow. "He told me that he should henceforth recruit his musketeers from among the guards of Monsieur the Cardinal." "The guards of the Cardinal? Why so?" asked Porthos warmly. Asked Porthos. I got distracted. "Because he plainly perceives that his piquet stands in need of being enlivened by a mixture of good wine." The 2 musketeers reddened to the whites of their eyes. D'Artagnan did not know where he was, and wished himself 100 feet underground. "Yes, yes," continued Monsieur de Treville, growing warmer as he spoke, "and his Majesty was right, for upon my honor it is true that the musketeers make but a miserable figure at court. The cardinal related yesterday, while playing with the king, with an air of condolence very displeasing to me, that the day before yesterday, those damned musketeers, those daredevils, dwelt upon those words with an ironical tone, still more displeasing to me. Those braggarts, added he, glancing at me with his tiger cat's eye. He made a riot in the Rue Ferou, in a cabaret, and that a party of his guards, I thought he was going to laugh in my face, had been forced to arrest the rioters. Morbleu! You must know something about it. Arrest musketeers. You were among them, you were. Don't deny it. You were recognized, and the cardinal named you. But it's all my fault. Yes, it's all my fault, because it is myself who selects my men. You, Aramis, why the devil did you ask me for a uniform when you would have been so much better in a cassock? And you, Porthos, do you only wear such a fine golden baldric to suspend a sword of straw from it? And Athos, I don't see Athos. Where is he? Ill. Very ill, you say, and of what malady? It is feared that it may be the smallpox, sir, replied Porthos, desirous of taking his turn in the conversation. And what is serious is that it will certainly spoil his face. The smallpox! That's a great story to tell me, Porthos. Sick of the smallpox at his age. No, no, but wounded without doubt. Killed, perhaps. Ah, if I knew. Sblood, messieurs musketeers, I will not have this haunting of bad places, this quarreling in the streets, this sword play at the crossways, and above all, I will not have occasion given for the cardinal's guards, who are brave, quiet, skillful men who never put themselves in a position to be arrested, and who besides never allow themselves to be arrested, to laugh at you. I am sure of it. They would prefer dying on the spot to being arrested or taking back a step. To save yourselves, to scamper away, to flee. That is good for the king's musketeers. Porthos and Aramis trembled with rage. They could willingly have strangled Monsieur de Treville, if, at the bottom of all this, they had not felt it was the great love he bore them which made him speak thus. They stamped upon the carpet with their feet. They bit their lips till blood came out, and grasped the hilts of their swords with all their might. All without had heard. As we have said, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis called, and had guessed from Monsieur de Treville's tone of voice he was very angry about something. 10 curious heads were glued to the tapestry and became pale with fury, for their ears, closely applied to the door, did not lose a syllable of what he said, while their mouths repeated as he went on the insulting expressions of the captain to all the people in the antechamber. In an instant, from the door of the cabinet to the street gate, the whole hotel was boiling. "Ah, the king's musketeers are arrested by the guards of the cardinal, are they?" continued Monsieur de Treville, as furious at heart as his soldiers, but emphasizing his words and plunging them, one by one, so to say, like so many blows of a stiletto, into the bosoms of his auditors. "What! 6 of his Eminence's guards arrest 6 of his Majesty's musketeers! Morbleu! My heart is taken! I will go straight to the Louvre. I will give in my resignation as captain of the king's musketeers to take a lieutenancy of the cardinal's guards. And if he refuses me, morbleu, I will turn abbé." These words, the murmur without, became an explosion. Nothing was to be heard but oaths and blasphemies. The morbleus, the sang-Dieus, the morts diables crossed one another into the air. D'Artagnan looked for some tapestry behind which he might hide himself, and felt an immense inclination to crawl under the table. "Well, my captain," said Porthos, quite beside himself, "the truth is that we were 6 against 6, but we were not captured by fair means, and before we had time to draw our swords, 2 of our party were dead, and Athos, grievously wounded, was very little better, for you know Athos. Well, captain, he endeavored twice to get up, and fell again twice, and we did not surrender. No, they dragged us away by force. On the way we escaped. As for Athos, they believed him to be dead and left him very quiet on the field of battle, not thinking it worth the trouble to carry him away. That's the whole story. What the devil, captain, one cannot win all one's battles. The great Pompey lost that Pharsalia, and Francis I, who was, as I have heard say, as good as other folks, nevertheless lost the battle of Pavia. And I have the honor of assuring you that I killed one of them with his own sword, said Aramis, for mine was broken at the first parry. Killed him, or poniarded him, sir, as is most agreeable to you. I did not know that, replied Monsieur de Treville in a somewhat softened tone. The cardinal exaggerated, as I perceive. But pray, sir, continued Aramis, who, seeing his captain become appeased, ventured to risk a prayer, do not say that Athos is wounded. He would be in despair if that should come to the ears of the king, and as the wound is very serious, seeing that after crossing the shoulder it penetrates into the chest, it is to be feared. This instant the tapestry was raised, and the noble and handsome head, but frightfully pale, appeared under the fringe. "Athos!" cried the 2 musketeers. "Athos!" replied Monsieur de Treville himself. "You have sent for me, sir?" said Athos to Monsieur de Treville in a feeble yet perfectly calm voice. "You have sent for me, as my comrades inform me. I have hastened to receive your orders. I am here. What do you want with me?" And at these words the musketeer, in irreproachable costume, belted as usual, with a tolerably firm step, entered the cabinet. Monsieur de Treville, moved to the bottom of his heart by this proof of courage, sprang toward him. "I was about to say that these gentlemen," added he, "that I forbid my musketeers to expose their lives needlessly. For brave men are very dear to the king, and the king knows that his musketeers are the bravest on the earth." Your hand, Arthos. And without waiting for the answer of the newcomer to this proof of affection, Monsieur de Treville seized his right hand and pressed it with all his might, without perceiving that Athos, whatever might be his self-command, allowed a self-murmur of pain to escape him, and if possible grew paler than he was before. The door had remained open, so strong was the excitement produced by the arrival of Athos, whose wound, though kept as a secret, was known to all. A burst of satisfaction hailed the last words of the captain, and 2 or 3 heads, carried away by the enthusiasm of the moment, appeared to the openings of the tapestry. Monsieur de Treville was about to reprehend this breach of the rules of etiquette, when he felt the hand of Athos, who had rallied all his energies to contend against pain, at length, overcome by it, fell upon the floor as if he were dead. "A surgeon!" cried Monsieur de Treville. "Mine, the king's, the best! A surgeon, or s'blood, my brave Athos will die!" At the cries of Monsieur de Treville, the whole assemblage rushed into the cabinet, he not thinking to shut the door against anyone, and all crowded around the wounded man. But all this eager attention might have been useless if the doctor so loudly called, for he had not chanced to be in the hotel. He pushed through the crowd, approached Athos, still insensible, and as all this noise and commotion inconvenienced him greatly, he required as the first and most urgent thing that the Musketeer should be carried into an adjoining chamber. Immediately, Monsieur de Treville opened and pointed the way to Porthos and Aramis, who bore their comrade in their arms. Behind this group walked the surgeon, and behind the surgeon the door closed. The cabinet of Monsieur de Treville, generally held so sacred, and became in an instant an annex of the antechamber. Everyone spoke, harangued, and vociferated, swearing, cursing, and consigned the cardinal and his guards to all the devils. An instant after, Porthos and Aramis re-entered, the surgeon and Monsieur de Treville alone remaining with the wounded. At length Monsieur de Treville himself returned. The injured man had recovered his senses. The surgeon declared that the situation of the Musketeer had nothing in it to render his friends uneasy, and his weakness having been purely and simply caused by loss of blood. Then Monsieur de Treville made a sign with his hand, and all retired, except D'Artagnan, who did not forget that he had an audience, and with the tenacity of a Gascon remained in his place. When all had gone out and the door was closed, Monsieur de Treville, on turning round, found himself alone with the young man. The event which had occurred had in some degree broken the thread of his ideas. He inquired what was the will of his persevering visitor. D'Artagnan then repeated his name, and in an instant recovering all his remembrances of the present and the past, Monsieur de Treville grasped the situation. "Pardon me," he said, smiling. "Pardon me, my dear compatriot, but I had wholly forgotten you. But what help is there for it? A captain is nothing but a father of a family, charged with even a greater responsibility than the father of an ordinary family. Soldiers are big children, but, as I maintain, that the orders of the king, and more particularly the orders of the cardinal, should be executed." D'Artagnan could not restrain a smile. By this smile, Monsieur de Treville judged that he had not to deal with a fool, and changing the conversation, came straight to the point. "I respected your father very much," said he. "What can I do for the son? Tell me quickly. My time is not my own." "Monsieur," said D'Artagnan, "on quitting Tarbes and coming hither, it was my intention to request of you, in remembrance of the friendship which you have not forgotten, the uniform of a musketeer. But after all that I have seen during the last 2 hours, I comprehend that such a favor is enormous, and tremble lest I should not merit it." "It is indeed a favor, young man," replied Monsieur de Treville, "but it may not be so far beyond your hopes as you believe, or rather as you appear to believe. But His Majesty's decision is always necessary, and I inform you with regret that no one becomes a musketeer without the preliminary ordeal of 7 campaigns, certain brilliant actions, or a service of 2 years in some other regiment less favored than ours." D'Artagnan bowed without replying, feeling his desire to don the musketeer's uniform vastly increased by the great difficulties which preceded the attainment of it. "But," continued Monsieur de Treville, fixing upon his compatriot a look so piercing that it might be said he wished to read the thoughts of his heart, "on account of my old companion, your father, as I have said, I will do something for you, young man. Our recruits from Béarn are not generally very rich, and I have no reason to think matters have much changed in their respect since I have left the province. I dare say you have not brought too large a stock of money with you. D'Artagnan drew upon himself with a proud air which plainly said, I ask alms of no man. Oh, that's very well, young man, continued Monsieur de Treville. That's all very well. I know these airs. I myself came to Paris with 4 crowns in my purse, and would have fought with anyone who dared to tell me I was not in a condition to purchase the Louvre. D'Artagnan's bearing became still more imposing. Thanks to the sale of his horse, he commenced his career with 4 more crowns than Monsieur de Treville possessed at the commencement of his. Ugh, what an idiot. Why did you sell the horse? That's going to come back and bite him, I know it. You ought, I say, then, to husband the means you have, however large the sum may be, but you ought also to endeavor to perfect yourself in the exercises of becoming a gentleman. I will write a letter today to the director of the Royal Academy, and tomorrow he will admit you without any expense to yourself. Do not refuse this little service. Our best-born and richest gentlemen sometimes solicit it without being able to obtain it. You will learn horsemanship, swordsmanship, in all its branches, and dancing. You will make some desirable acquaintances, and from time to time you can call upon me just to tell me how you are getting on and to say whether I can be of further service to you. D'Artagnan, stranger as he was to all the manners of the court, could not but perceive a little coldness in this reception. Alas, sir, said he, I cannot perceive how sadly I missed the letter of introduction which my father gave me to present to you. I certainly am surprised, replied Monsieur de Treville, that you should undertake so long a journey without that necessary passport, the sole resource of us poor Béarnese. I had one, sir, and thank God such as I could wish, cried D'Artagnan, but it was perfidiously stolen from me. He then related the adventure of Meung, described the unknown gentleman with the greatest minuteness, and all the warmth and truthfulness that delighted Monsieur de Treville. This is all very strange, said Monsieur de Treville, after meditating a minute. You mentioned my name, then, aloud? Yes, sir, I certainly committed that imprudence, but why should I have done otherwise? A name like yours must be as a buckler to me on my way. Judge if I should not put on myself under its protection. Flattery was at that period very current, and Monsieur de Treville loved incense as well as a king, or even a cardinal. He could not refrain from a smile of visible satisfaction, but this smile soon disappeared, and returning to the adventure of Meung, Tell me, continued he, had not this gentleman a slight scar on his cheek? Yes, such a one as would be made by the grazing of a ball. Was he not a fine-looking man? Yes. Of lofty stature? Yes. Of pale complexion and brown hair? Yes, that is he. How is it, sir, that you are acquainted with this man? If I ever find him again, and I will find him, I swear, were it in hell. He was waiting for a woman, continued Treville. He departed immediately after having conversed for a minute with her whom he awaited. You know not the subject of their conversation? He gave her a box, told her not to open it except in London. Was this woman English? He called her Milady. It is he. It must be he, murmured Treville. I believed him still at Brussels. Oh, sir, if you know who this man is, cried D'Artagnan, tell me who he is, and whence he is. I will then release you from all your promises, even that of procuring my admission into the Musketeers, for before everything, I wish to avenge myself. Beware, young man, cried Treville. If you see him coming on one side of the street, pass by on the other. Do not cast yourself against such a rock. He will break you like glass. That will not prevent me, replied D'Artagnan, if ever I find him. In the meantime, said Treville, seek him not, if I have a right to advise you. All at once the captain stopped, as if struck by a sudden suspicion. This great hatred which the young traveler manifested so loudly for this man, who, a rather improbable thing, had stolen his father's letter from him. Was there not some perfidy concealed under this hatred? Might not this young man be sent by his eminence? Might he not have come for the purpose of laying a snare for him? This pretended D'Artagnan. Was he not an emissary of the cardinal, whom the cardinal sought to introduce into Treville's house, to place near him, to win his confidence, and afterward to ruin him as he had done in 1,000 other instances? He fixed his eyes upon D'Artagnan, even more earnestly than before. He was moderately reassured, however, by the aspect of the countenance, full of astute intelligence and affected humility. I know he is a Gascon, reflected he. but he may be for the cardinal as well as for me. Let us try him. My friend, said he slowly, I wish as the son of an ancient friend, for I consider this story of the lost letter perfectly true, I wish, I say, in order to repair the coldness you may have remarked in my reception of you, to discover to you the secrets of our policy. The king and the cardinal are the best of friends. Their apparent bickerings are only feints to deceive fools. I am not willing that a compatriot, a handsome cavalier, a brave youth, quite fit to make his way, should become the dupe of all these artifices and fall into the snare after the example of so many others who may have been ruined by it. Be assured that I am devoted to both these all-powerful masters, and that my earnest endeavors have no other aim than to service of the king, and also the cardinal, one of the most illustrious geniuses that France has ever produced. Now, young man, regulate your conduct accordingly, and if you entertain, whether from your family, your relations, or even from your instincts, any of these enmities which we see constantly breaking out against the cardinal, bid me adieu and let us separate. I will aid you in many ways, but without attaching you to my person. I hope that my frankness at least will make you my friend, for you are the only young man to whom I have hitherto spoken as I have done to you. Treville said to himself, if the cardinal has set this young fox upon me, he will certainly not have failed. He who knows how bitterly I execrate him, to tell his spy that the best means of making his court to me is to rail at him. Therefore, in spite of all my protestations, if it be as I suspect, my cunning gossip will assure me that he holds his eminence in horror. It, however, proved otherwise. D'Artagnan answered with the greatest simplicity, I came to Paris with exactly such intentions. My father advised me to stoop to nobody but the king, the cardinal, and yourself, whom he considered the first three personages in France. D'Artagnan added M. de Treville to the others, as may be perceived, but he thought this addition would do no harm. I have the greatest veneration for the cardinal, continued he, and the most profound respect for his actions. So much the better for me, sir, if you speak to me, as you say, with frankness, for then you will do me the honor to esteem the resemblance of our opinions. But if you have entertained any doubt as naturally as you may, I feel that I am ruining myself by speaking the truth. But I still trust you will not esteem me the less for it, and that is my object, among all others, beyond all others. Monsieur de Treville was surprised to the greatest degree. So much penetration, so much frankness, created admiration, but did not entirely remove his suspicions. The more this young man was superior to others, the more he was to be dreaded if he meant to deceive him. Nevertheless, he pressed D'Artagnan's hand and said to him, You are an honest youth, but at the present moment I can only do for you that which I just now offered. My hotel will always be open to you. Hereafter, being able to ask for me at all hours, and consequently to take advantage of all opportunities, you will probably obtain that which you desire. That is to say, replied D'Artagnan, that you will wait until I have proved myself worthy of it. Well, be assured, added he with the familiarity of a Gascon, you shall not wait long. And he bowed in order to retire, and as if he considered the future in his own hands. But wait a minute, said M. de Treville, stopping him. I promised you a letter for the director of the academy. Are you too proud to accept it, young gentleman? No, sir, said D'Artagnan, and I will guard it so carefully that I will be sworn it shall arrive to its address, and woe be to him who shall attempt to take it from me. Monsieur de Treville smiled at this flourish, and leaving his young man compatriot in the embrasure of the window, where they had talked together, he seated himself at a table in order to write the promised letter of recommendation. While he was doing this, D'Artagnan, having no better employment, amused himself with beating a march upon the window and with looking at the Musketeers, who went away one after another, following them with his eyes until they disappeared. Monsieur de Treville, after having written the letter, sealed it, and rising, approached the young man in order to give it to him. But at the very moment when D'Artagnan stretched out his hand to receive it, Monsieur de Treville was highly astonished to see his protégé make a sudden spring, become crimson with passion, and rush from the cabinet, crying, Sblood, he shall not escape from me this time. And who? Asked Monsieur de Treville. He, my thief, replied D'Artagnan. Ah, the traitor! And he disappeared. The devil take the madman, murmured Monsieur de Treville. Unless, added he, this is a cunning mode of escaping, seeing that he had failed in his purpose. Chapter 4. The shoulder of Athos, the baldric of Porthos, and the handkerchief. It's like spaced out weird. And Chapter 4. The shoulder of Athos, the baldric of Porthos, and the handkerchief of Aramis. D'Artagnan, in a state of fury, crossed the antechamber at 3 bounds, and was darting toward the stairs, which he reckoned upon descending 4 at a time, when, in his heedless course, he ran head foremost amongst a musketeer who was coming out of one of Monsieur de Treville's private rooms, and striking his shoulder violently, made him utter a cry, or rather a howl. "Excuse me," said D'Artagnan, endeavoring to resume his course. "Excuse me, but I am in a hurry." Scarcely had he descended the first stair, when a hand of iron seized him by the belt, and stopped him. "You are in a hurry," said the musketeer, as pale as a sheet. "Under that pretense you run against me. You say, 'Excuse me,' and you believe that is sufficient? Not at all, my young man. Do you fancy, because you have heard Monsieur de Treville speak to us a little cavalierly today, that other people are to treat us as he speaks to us? Undeceive yourself, comrade. You are not Monsieur de Treville." "My faith!" replied D'Artagnan, recognizing Athos, who, after the dressing performed by the doctor, was returning to his own apartment. I did not do it intentionally, and, not doing it intentionally, I said, 'Excuse me.' It appears to me that this is quite enough. I repeat to you, however, and this time, of my word of honor, I think perhaps too often, that I am in haste, great haste. Leave your hold, then, I beg of you, and let me go where my business calls me." "Monsieur," said Athos, letting him go, "you are not polite. It is easy to perceive that you come from a distance." D'Artagnan had already strode down 3 or 4 stairs, but Athos's last remark he stopped short. "Morbleu, monsieur," said he, "however far I may come, it is not you who can give me a lesson in good manners, I warn you." "Perhaps," said Athos. "Ah, if I were not in such haste, and if I were not running after someone," said D'Artagnan. "Monsieur, man in a hurry, you can find me without running. Me, you understand." "And where, I pray you?" "Near the Carme de Chaux." "At what hour?" "About noon." "About noon? That will do. I will be there. Endeavor not to make me wait, for at 12:15 I will cut off your ears as you run." "Good," cried D'Artagnan. "I will be there 10 minutes before 12." And he set off running as if the devil possessed him, hoping that he might yet find the stranger whose slow pace could not have carried him far. But at the street gate, Porthos was talking with the soldier on guard. Between the 2 talkers there was just enough room for a man to pass. D'Artagnan thought it would suffice for him, and he sprang forward like a dart between them. But D'Artagnan had reckoned without the wind. As he was about to pass, the wind blew out Porthos's long cloak, and D'Artagnan rushed straight into the middle of it. Without doubt, Porthos had reasons for not abandoning this part of his vestments, for instead of quitting his hold on the flap in his hand, he pulled it toward him, so that D'Artagnan rolled himself up in the velvet by a movement of rotation explained by the persistency of Porthos. D'Artagnan, hearing the Musketeer swear, wished to escape from the cloak, which blinded him, and sought to find his way from under the folds of it. He was particularly anxious to avoid marring the freshness of the magnificent baldric we were acquainted with, but on timidly opening his eyes, he found himself with his nose fixed between the 2 shoulders of Porthos, that is to say, exactly upon the baldric. Alas, like most things in this world which have nothing in their favor but appearances, the baldric was glittering with gold in the front, but was nothing but simple buff behind. Vainglorious as he was, Porthos could not afford to have a baldric wholly of gold, but had at least half. One could comprehend the necessity of the cold and the urgency of the cloak. "Bless me!" cried Porthos, making strong efforts to disembarrass himself of D'Artagnan, who was wriggling about his back. "You must be mad to run against people in this manner." "Excuse me," said D'Artagnan, reappearing under the shoulder of the giant, "but I am in such haste. I was running after someone, and—" "And do you always forget your eyes when you run?" asked Porthos. "No," replied D'Artagnan, piqued, "and, thanks to my eyes, I can see what other people cannot see." Whether Porthos understood him or did not understand him, giving way to his anger, "Monsieur," said he, "you stand a chance of getting chastised if you rub Musketeers in this fashion." "Chastised, monsieur," said D'Artagnan. "The expression is strong." "It is the one that becomes a man accustomed to look his enemies in the face. Ah, pardieu! I knew full well that you don't turn your back to yours." The young man, delighted with his joke, went away laughing loudly. Porthos foamed with rage, and made a movement to rush after D'Artagnan. "Presently, presently," cried the latter, "when you haven't your cloak on." "At 1 o'clock, then." Fudging, hey, dude. He's just getting in fights with everybody. "At 1 o'clock, then, behind Luxembourg." "Very well, at 1 o'clock, then," replied D'Artagnan, returning. Oh my gosh. This is too good. "Very well, at 1 o'clock, then," replied D'Artagnan, returning the angle of the street. But neither in the street. How is he gonna get in a fight with Aramis though? Aramis seems like so chill. Is he really gonna pick a fight with Aramis? Oh my gosh. But neither in the street he had passed through, nor in the one which his eager glance pervaded, could he see anyone. However slowly the stranger had walked, he was gone on his way, or perhaps had entered some house. D'Artagnan inquired of everyone he met with, went down to the ferry, came up again by the Rue de Seine and the Red Cross, but nothing, absolutely nothing. This chase was, however, advantageous to him in one sense, for in proportion as the perspiration broke from his forehead, his heart began to cool. He began to reflect upon the events that had passed. They were numerous and inauspicious. It was scarcely 11 o'clock in the morning, and yet this morning had already brought him into disgrace with Monsieur de Treville, who could not fail to think the manner in which D'Artagnan had left him a little cavalier. Besides this, he had drawn upon himself 2 good duels with 2 men, each capable of killing 3 D'Artagnans, with 2 Musketeers, in short, with 2 of those being whom he esteemed so greatly that he placed them in his mind and heart above all other men. The outlook was sad. Sure of being killed by Athos, it may easily be understood that the young man was not very uneasy about Porthos. As hope, however, is this last thing extinguished in the heart of man, he finished by hoping that he might survive, even though with his terrible wounds in both these duels, and in case of surviving, he made the following reprehensions upon his own conduct. "What a madcap I was, and what a stupid fellow I am! That brave and unfortunate Athos was wounded on that very shoulder against which I must run head foremost like a ram. The only thing that astonishes me is that he did not strike me dead at once. He had good cause to do so. The pain I gave him must have been atrocious. As to Porthos, faith, that's a droll affair." And in spite of himself, the young man began to laugh aloud, looking round carefully, however, to see that his solitary laugh, without a cause in the eyes of passers-by, offended no one. "As to Porthos, that is certainly droll, but I am not the less a giddy fool. Are people to be run against without warning? No. And have I any right to go and peep under their cloaks to see what is not there? He would certainly have pardoned me if I had not said anything to him about that cursed baldric, in ambiguous words, it is true, but rather drolly and ambiguous. Ah, cursed Gascon that I am! I get from one hobble into another. Friend D'Artagnan," continued he, speaking to himself with all the amenity that he thought due to himself, "if you escape, of which there is not much chance, I would advise you to practice perfect politeness for the future. You must henceforth be admired and quoted as a model of it. To be obliging and polite does not necessarily make a man a coward. Look at Aramis now. Aramis is mildness and grace personified. Well, did anybody ever dream of calling Aramis a coward? No, certainly not. And from this moment I will endeavor to model myself after him. Ah, that's strange. Here he is." Oh my gosh. This is getting good. D'Artagnan, walking and soliloquizing, had arrived within a few steps of the Hôtel d'Arguillon, and in front of that hotel perceived Aramis chatting gaily with 3 gentlemen. But as he had not forgotten that it was in presence of this young man that Monsieur de Treville had been so angry in the morning, and as a witness of the rebuke the Musketeers had received, was not likely to be at all agreeable, he pretended not to see him. D'Artagnan, on the contrary, quite full of his plans of conciliation and courtesy, approached the young men with a profound bow, accompanied by a most gracious smile. All four, besides, immediately broke off their conversation. D'Artagnan was not so dull as to perceive that he was one too many, but he was not sufficiently broken into the fashions of the gay world to know how to extricate himself gallantly from a false position, like that of a man who begins to mingle with people he is scarcely acquainted with and in a conversation that does not concern him. He was seeking in his mind, then, for the least awkward means of retreat, when he remarked that Aramis had let his handkerchief fall, and by mistake, no doubt, had placed his foot upon it. This appeared to be a favorable opportunity to repair his intrusion. He stooped, and with the most gracious air he could assume, drew the handkerchief from under the foot of the musketeer, in spite of the efforts the latter made to detain it, and holding it out to him, said, "I believe, monsieur, that this is a handkerchief you would be sorry to lose." The handkerchief was indeed richly embroidered, and had a coronet and arms at one of its corners. Aramis blushed excessively, and snatched rather than took the handkerchief from the hand of the Gascon. "Ah, ah!" cried one of the guards. "Will you persist in saying, most discreet Aramis, that you are not on good terms with Madame de Bois Tracy, when that gracious lady has the kindness to lend you one of her handkerchiefs?" Uh-oh. Aramis darted at D'Artagnan one of those looks which inform a man that he has acquired a mortal enemy. Then, resuming his mild air, "You are deceived, gentlemen," said he. "This handkerchief is not mine, and I cannot fancy why monsieur has taken it into his hand to offer it to me rather than to one of you. And as a proof of what I say, here is mine in my pocket." So saying, he pulled out his own handkerchief, likewise a very elegant handkerchief, and of fine cambric, though cambric was dear at the period, but a handkerchief without embroidery and without arms, only ornamented with a single cipher, that of its proprietor. This time D'Artagnan was not hasty. He perceived his mistake, but the friends of Aramis were not at all convinced by his denial, and one of them addressed the young musketeer with affected seriousness. "If it were as you pretend it is," said he, "I should be forced, my dear Aramis, to reclaim it myself, for, as you very well know, Boy Tracy is an intimate friend of mine, and I cannot allow the property of his wife to be sported as a trophy." "You make this demand badly," replied Aramis, "and while acknowledging the justice of your reclamation, I refuse it on account of the form." "The fact is," hazarded D'Artagnan timidly, "I did not see the handkerchief fall from the pocket of Monsieur Aramis. He had his foot upon it, that is all, and I thought from having his foot upon it that the handkerchief was his." "And you are deceived, my dear sir," replied Aramis coldly, very little sensible to the reparation. Then turning toward that one of the guards who had declared himself the friend of Boy Tracy, "Besides," continued he, "I have reflected, my dear, the intimate of Boy Tracy, that I am not less tenderly his friend than you can possibly be, so that decidedly this handkerchief is as likely to have fallen from your pocket as mine." "No, upon my honor," cried his Majesty's guardsman. "You are about to swear upon your honor, and I upon my word, and that it will be pretty evident that one of us will have lied. Now here, Montaran, we will do better than that. Let each take a half." "Of the handkerchief?" "Yes." "Perfectly just," cried the other two guardsmen. "The judgment of King Solomon. Aramis, you certainly are full of wisdom." The young men burst into a laugh, and, as may be supposed, the affair had no other sequel. In a moment or two the conversation ceased, and the three guardsmen and the musketeer, after having cordially shaken hands, separated, the guardsmen going one way and Aramis another. "Now is my time to make peace with this gallant man." "Yeah, that's going to help," said D'Artagnan to himself, having stood on one side during the whole of the latter part of the conversation, and with this good feeling drawing near to Aramis, who was departing without paying any attention to him. "Monsieur," said he, "you will excuse me, I hope." "Ah, monsieur," interrupted Aramis, "permit me to observe to you that you have not acted in this affair as a gallant man ought." "What, monsieur?" cried D'Artagnan. "And do you suppose I suppose, monsieur, that you are not a fool, and that you knew very well, although coming from Gascony, that people do not tread upon handkerchiefs without a reason. What the devil! Paris is not paved with cambric. Monsieur, you act wrongly in endeavoring to mortify me, said D'Artagnan, in whom the natural quarrelsome spirit began to speak more loudly than his pacific resolutions. I am from Gascony, it is true, and since you know it, there is no occasion to tell you that Gascons are not very patient, so that when they have begged to be excused once, were it even for a folly, they are convinced that they have done already at least as much again as they ought to have done. Monsieur, what I say to you about the matter, said Aramis, is not for the sake of seeking a quarrel. Thank God I am not a bravo, and being a musketeer but for a time, I only fight when I am forced to do so, and as always with great repugnance. But this time the affair is serious, for here is a lady compromised by you. By us, you mean? Cried D'Artagnan. Why did you so maladroitly restore me the handkerchief? Why did you so awkwardly let it fall? I have said, monsieur, and I repeat, that the handkerchief did not fall from my pocket. And thereby you have lied twice, monsieur, for I saw it fall. Ah, you take that with great tone, do you, Master Garçon? Well, I will teach you how to behave yourself, and I will send you back to your mass book, Master Abbé. Draw, if you please, and instantly, not so, if you please, my good friend. Not here, at least. Do you not perceive that we are opposite the Hotel d'Argolion, which is full of the cardinal's creatures? How do I know that this is not his eminence who has honored you with the commission to procure my head? Now, I entertain a ridiculous partiality for my head. It seems to suit my shoulders so correctly. I wish to kill you, be at rest as to that, but to kill you quietly in a snug, remote place, where you will not be able to boast of your death to anybody. I agree, monsieur, but do not be too confident. Take your handkerchief, whether it belongs to you or another. You may perhaps stand in need of it. Monsieur is a Gascon? Asked Aramis. Yes, monsieur does not postpone an interview through prudence. Prudence, monsieur, is a virtue sufficiently useless to musketeers, I know, but indispensable to churchmen. And as I am only a musketeer provisionally, I hold it good to be prudent. At 2 o'clock, I shall have the honor of expecting you at the hotel of Monsieur de Treville. There, I will indicate to you the best place and time. The two young men bowed and separated, Aramis ascending the street which led to the Luxembourg, while D'Artagnan, perceiving the appointed hour was approaching, took the road to the Carme Deschaux, saying to himself, "Decidedly, I can't draw back, but at least, if I am killed, I shall be killed by a musketeer."